Attention, fans of Unfinished Business Television, we're thrilled to announce our proud partnership with Super 7, the ultimate destination for collectors and pop culture enthusiasts alike. Visit super74.com/AJEPYX today. Use promo code AJEPYX, and let's keep the good times rolling here at Unfinished Business Television.
Howdy, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Unfinished Business Television. This episode, we have a very special guest. Some of you might remember if you're not reading underneath. But let me tell you, our next guest is not only a blast from the past, but a treasured memory of youth for many of us. This is an actor, writer, producer, musician who made his film debut as a co-star of the mayor of the movie, sorry, my handwriting, of the movie Cobb and a Half, and kept working in television and movies with notable co-stars such as Joan Plowright, Wesley Snipes, Joe Pesci, Patrick Stewart, and Oprah. I don't think I have to say the last name. I think we all know who that is. He is still working and making a difference out there in the world with his art and just as a just really cool guy and human being. Without further ado, we here at Unfinished Business Television are happy to present our interview with Norman D. Golden II.
Yeah, so Norman, thank you so much for coming on to speak with us. Both
Yes.
Jeff and I, we've been big fans of Cop and a Half since we were kids. We saw a lot of ourselves in you watching that film, which is one of the reasons why it still stands out. And, obviously you've had a pretty amazing career at that time with so many of the people that you've worked with. So I have to ask, just to start it off, what was it that got you into acting at such an early age?
Actually, it's much of what you meant. Well, I mean, which much of what you mentioned. Excuse me. As far as seeing yourself in someone that you're seeing on screen, and that's the side note but relevant. That's power. That's the power of media. So I actually was inspired by the Cosby Kids. My folks and I used to watch the show. As you may know, we're in our community at some point in time, before the scandal and all that stuff like that was a staple in our community. And so, seeing those kids, understanding that, I was old enough to know that this was not like real, TV was the make-believe world, but it still seemed like so much fun. I was intrigued by, the chemistry and the charisma and all of that. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, it went from I want to do that to I can do that to I'm gonna do that. Mom, Dad, hey, like, can you hook something up so that I can do what those kids are doing? Because that's dope. Yeah.
Well, I guess my question is, you wanted you knew from a young age you wanted to do that. Did
Yeah.
you take like any acting classes or workshops?
So I did a workshop, which was actually my entry into the industry. There was a commercial workshop that my mom found out through my auntie who had her son at the time, who he's still in the industry, he's doing things as well. But at the time he was, had gotten started through that commercial workshop. So yeah, I did a workshop. Um, and interestingly enough, it was a commercial workshop, but after I completed it was like a 6-week course or whatnot. Most of the instructors were like, well, I mean, he's great. He can do, commercials and whatnot, but he has a theatrical talent. So you guys should, pursue that, talking to my friends, like, you guys should really pursue that for him if he's going to do this, because he could be, very successful. And at the same time, there were agents and managers as scouting talent at this particular workshop, and there were like three agents and a couple of managers that were there that were like, well, we want to take them, and all of them were theatrical agents actually. And so, my mom and dad were like, okay, well, they're saying this, and this is kind of what's, it's manifesting naturally that way, where we have theatrical agents wanting to sign them. Let's do it and see what happens, and see the rest is.
Yeah, so I mean, your first big true break was Cop and a Half and working with the great Burt Reynolds. Do you remember the audition process for that film? Because I know you were picked out of thousands of kids that read for Devin Butler. What was it that you did that stood out from the rest of the pack, if you could recall?
I think, well, there were a few things that were mentioned just over the years, but one of the major things was my ability to, I guess, like, if you will, keep up with Burt Reynolds. Like when I did the screen test. Well, let me. I'll say this before I continue that thought.
Sure.
Hopefully, I remember to go back to that. But so getting back to your question, the audition process. So it was a little arduous. I auditioned three times. I had three auditions. With the main one audition, two callbacks, and then a screen test. And so after the first callback, I actually was excluded from consideration because they figured that I would be too small to, do the stunts and, whatever else they were thinking. But one of the casting associates, she wasn't even actually a director at the time, was like, you guys got to keep this man or this boy in the running because like he's, as far as the talent, like he's got it. He's got the, the charisma. He's got the chops to do this. He's not just a cute face. You guys can work out. You can get stunt doubles or whatever. So that's when I got the second call back, and this was, mind you, a span of maybe 6 months or so, maybe longer. My memory, that's 30 something years ago. So I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
So it might have been 6 months, it might have been a year, but I know it was quite time, because after a while I was sitting there like, okay, well, I auditioned for that thing, guess it didn't happen, so on to the next thing. Then I kept getting called back, and I'm like, all right, well, what the hell? My little kid at the time. So third audition or second callback came around, and that's when things started to get like really serious for me staying in the running. So they order a screen test, and at the screen test they were only, it had gotten down to, I think, 10 kids, and then they eliminated four. And then now, stepping back just a little bit, that at this point, that opened up, it was, I think, close to like 3,000 kids, 3 or 4,000 kids that they had seen at some point. Burt Reynolds himself had auditioned like 200 and something, and he was like, I'm just, because he didn't do films with kids, so he's like, I'm about to walk out if y'all don't give me somebody that I can work with. So, yeah, so the screen test had eliminated all those kids, and then we got down to 10. They eliminated four, and then it got down to six of us. It was two from New York, two from Chicago, and no, not Chicago. I'm sorry, two from Florida, I think, and then two from LA. I was one of the kids from LA, and so I was the second to the last kid to go through that process of the screen test. And to this day, I'm sorry, I have to say, I'm like, to the kid who had to go in after me, so sorry for him. I say that because once I read, Bert was like, this is the kid. I don't want to see anyone else. And I think that kid was from New York. And so they're like, well, you have to test him because, we flew him out to do this. So he's like, all right, I'll go through the motions and test this kid. But I know I found who I, had to get. So anyway, so yeah, so that was pretty much the process. Quite arduous. It was like, yeah, three auditions, a screen test. I was like really a part of the last selection. I mean, I had gotten, like I said, booted out of the process because of my size and all that
Right.
stuff. But then, once they realized like, okay, well, as far as talent, he definitely has it, stayed in the running, and I was part of that last like group of, like I said, 6 kids that went in, and then eventually Bert was like, yeah, this is, who I want to work with.
That's a good casting story. Now, my question for you: when you're auditioning, do you recognize Henry Winkler, the Fonz? When he's like putting you through this process.
So I actually didn't meet Bert and Henry until the screen test.
Oh, okay.
Um, Now I had, I knew that Burt Reynolds was the star of this film. I think I learned that at the callback. And my parent, and the only reason why I knew is because I mean, obviously my parents knew who these people were. I was 7 at the time. I'm like, know who the Fonz was. I didn't know. I mean, we're talking, these guys were like stars in like the 70s, early 80s.
Mhm.
This is early 90s. I'm 7 years old. I didn't know who these people were. Which I thought was actually, in hindsight, a great thing because it wasn't like I really was able to be my natural self. Not that I wouldn't have done it if it were someone that I knew, just because I loved acting and that's just, I'm an actor. So it's like, yeah, let's play, let's do this. But I guarantee you, I will sometimes it would have been a lot different if it had been like Eddie Murphy.
Mhm.
Of
Yes.
course.
Or like, okay, I know who you are. Like, whoa, But Burt Reynolds, I didn't know who he was, and that was a blessing in disguise because he was a great guy. I mean, talking about being an actor, like he was from that era. I was actually did an interview a little while ago, and I was talking about like the process of acting and how he was from an era where it really was about the craft of acting and not your follower count and all this visible like gotta be in every commercial and music video and everything. It's like you stick to your craft and you learn that and you do it well. So I learned a lot from him just with that, just him coming from that era and that energy.
Okay. I actually have a follow up question. Um, Throughout your career, like I feel like as you were saying, it would be different because you might have been a little more starstruck if you knew who your co-star and director were. Did you find any time in your career when working that you were ever starstruck by anybody you were co-starring with?
Um, Not really. I think because a lot of people that I worked with were, they were much older, because I was a
Hmm.
child. So I didn't
Yeah.
really know their body of work, not understanding that their body of work was substantial. And, I'm like essentially working with legends, which, in a whole nother conversation, I'm like, that's fortunate for me, uh,
Hmm.
to have had those opportunities. Yeah, I didn't really know. I think maybe like behind the scenes, like I would be asked to go to events and do
Uh-huh.
certain things or whatever. And obviously, you show up and it's like, oh, there's Danny DeVito, oh, there's Tom Cruise, there's Tom Hanks, there's whoever, and it's like, oh, now I know these people, but never really having to work with those folks in particular,
Okay.
like on stage, not. And I'll add to that and say, by the time like because I did a film called The Boy Who Painted Christ Black, and Wesley
Hmm.
Snipes,
Yeah.
and that of course I knew who Wesley Snipes well, but by that time I had been accustomed to, like this is what I do. Like I might do a film with someone that's notable. And then it's so interesting because my parents and my reps at the time, and I was like, "Well, Norman, you're also notable." And I'm like, "Well, but yeah, but I'm not Wesley Snipes." And they're like, "Yeah, but people know who you are." So that concept never really,
Mhm.
I never really fully grasped that until like later, So yeah, by that time, I was like 11, I think, when I worked with him. So it was like, "Oh yeah, this is Wesley Snipes," but it was more of like I'm excited to work with him, but this is also my colleague essentially.
Right.
Yeah. Mm.
So it was a little different than when I had first started, where it would have been a little bit more like, oh my God, like if Wesley Snipes had been in Cop and a Half, and I probably would be like, oh my God, you worked with him, is like, oh, hey, Wesley, how you doing? Or Mr. Snipes.
Hey, I smell sequel. Right there.
So many people over the years has hinted at that. It's so interesting because I actually, just for fun, kind of not really for fun, because I was kind of serious about maybe even doing a sequel. Actually wrote a sequel when I started writing, and I wrote a sequel to Cop and a Half called The Half Is Back. And I made the rookie mistake at the time. I was like 16.
Oh.
You know, 2 years earlier, I'd gotten Final Draft software, my first Final Draft software, for like Christmas or something. And so I had been writing and coming up with stories or whatever. I was like, yeah, make a a sequel to Cop and a Half and see what this would do. And then I sent it to to Universal, and like 2 weeks later, got a cease and desist letter like, hey,
Oh,
goodness
jeez.
this is unsolicited material. Like, I laugh at it because I'm like, okay, the irony is that you got the co-star of the film sending you this thing, and it's like, well, it's still unsolicited. I'm like, all right. I mean, I guess from a legal standpoint it is, but
Give it a chance.
a read,
Exactly.
Yeah, I have a serious question, but just to
Mhm.
kind of piggyback on that fact, they never approached you about the Lou Diamond Phillips straight-to-video sequel, Cop and a Half?
No,
Oh,
I
man.
didn't even know. I actually didn't know that film. It had come out. It had been released. And I don't know, I'm like, "Man, am I under a rock somewhere?" Because I didn't know that it was out until somebody on I think Instagram had messaged me like, "Hey, do you know? Are you something like to the effect of, I so excited to see the sequel to Cop and a Half. Like, are you in it or whatever?" And I'm thinking that it's kind of a joke, like, "Ha, yeah." But then when I saw, I'm like, "Oh, there is a sequel," and no, I didn't know anything about it.
Oh man. Did you ever watch it?
No, I didn't watch it because, I mean, no disrespect to Lou Diamond and the girl who was, like, I guess, the half. But for one, I never really got around to it, and honestly, it just didn't seem. It wasn't as I don't know. I'm gonna be careful with saying this, so if people see this interview, they're like, "Oh, this guy."
Yes. How dare he talk about
Yeah,
Cop
like,
and a Half?
who the hell do you think
Fuck
he is?
him.
But no, it didn't. I mean, like, on its own, it didn't really appeal to me, and that's maybe because, like, I was a part of. I mean, I was in the original film, and I understand, like, there's a lot of politics that went around that was around, like, the actual original film, because the original film, actually, Macaulay Culkin was supposed to be, the half, and it was one of those things where time kind of ran out in terms of the development of Cop and a Half. So which meant because Cop and a Half, the development started in, like, I want to say, like, 89 or 90, and you guys know what was happening with Macaulay Culkin.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So he's like, "Copping or what? No, I'm about to go get this $5 million check," or whatever, whatever. So I say all that to say, I'm like, there's so many opportunities that, Universal, because I did many years before Cop and a Half, was it called, I think, like, New Recruit or something, came out.
Mhm.
They could have circled back and said, "Hey, Norm, like, are you still alive? Are you sober? Are you clean?" What, that was a joke, you guys.
I know.
Um, do you wanna, like, do this? But I wasn't afforded that opportunity. So I'm like, okay, so I see this completely new project I had nothing to do with, okay, I mean, I guess, but I did just really didn't, in a nutshell, I really didn't have a desire to see it. And I heard that it wasn't that great, so I
Mm.
don't necessarily have a habit of watching films that
Like,
great. I mean,
understandable.
Yeah, I've inadvertently, sometimes you inadvertently stumble on a film that's
Yeah.
not great, and you're like, okay, that is not great. And then sometimes you want to just see a film just because you want to see it, and it happens to not be great. But with that one, I just didn't have a desire to see it.
Okay, understandable. Mm.
So
But
now,
eventually, one day I might get around to.
so going back to the real cop and a half with you.
The real.
Yes. So like, going back to that film, I saw a lot of the traits and references that your character was doing all throughout. Because obviously, you have the Eddie Murphy thing going on in certain scenes. So there's nods to 48 Hours and even nods to cop shows at the time, like Miami Vice, Hill Street Blues. Did you watch cop shows as a kid to get into this? Or, like, did you have any exposure? No?
No. Again, I was 7, so when they're making references to Miami Vice, which I mean that premiered the year I was born.
Mhm.
It was off the air by the time I knew what a TV was, and essentially, and so yeah, I didn't really go back and watch any of those. Interestingly enough, just in conversation, during in between takes while we were shooting, Bert would reference these things, and he would, give me the kid cliff notes, if you will, of like, the kid friendly version. Oh yeah, Hill Street Bill, Hill Street Blues, or Miami Vice. There was a scene or this episode where this happened, and blah blah blah. So like, I could understand a little bit of like what we were doing, so it just wasn't like coming off as like a foreign language. Like, what am I saying? Like, I'm saying this stuff about Miami Vice, but I don't know the show. So yeah, he kind of helped me a little bit with that. But I didn't, growing up, I didn't really watch. Well, and my formative years, like I didn't watch those types of shows.
Mm. Now, again, jumping a little, like when you, I guess, look back at your career, you've had, again, notable co-stars. Did any of them give you more life advice that you still use to this day, rather than like just acting advice or advice about the industry? Mm.
Um, Co-stars of people that I worked with, life advice. Yeah, yes and no. I mean, mostly I would say, Burt Reynolds actually comes to mind. I mean, there was only so much life advice he could give an 8-year-old.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
He was great in that way in which there's a lot of things that I recall what he would say or he said to me that it's like, at 41, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I understand why he was saying it in the way in which he was saying it because I could only understand it, my 8-year-old brain, but now I get that,
Okay.
let's see, another person, I mean, there was a couple of conversations that I had with Wesley when I worked with him. We're both martial artists, so interestingly,
Okay.
we kind of found a common ground with that, or not common ground, but like a commonality in between takes. With that, we actually study the same art. So, there was a few little nuggets he would say every now and then. Actually, the director of that project, Bill Duke,
Will do. Hmm.
an immense amount of respect for. He was actually one of the best directors. I might even say the best director. I don't want to know, but yeah, I mean, I just, and when I say it, like, because you guys asked about like advice, I just think that his character and the way that he, like his directing style, and just you even look at his body of work and just what he stands for as a person, as a director, like just observing that for the time that I had to work with him, and then after seeing him continue to move and groove the way he does, that has definitely stuck with me. Let's see. One other person, actually, that same project, Yolanda King, may she rest in peace. There was not necessarily while we were on set, but I had an opportunity to reconnect with her many years after that film was completed. And yeah, I just remember a lot of the little stories and words of wisdom she would, put out there. Stories meaning, because with her being Martin Luther King's daughter, and me having had that up close and personal, opportunity to work with her, that that still sticks to me as well.
Mm.
She talked some of the nuggets that she spoke of, because that might be one of your follow-up questions. So I'll just maybe not, but I'll just go. She spoke a lot about like your character, and what what you bring to your art. A lot of people expect, a lot of artists, expect, well, the way in which she was kind of putting it, when we were having this conversation, was that, a lot of artists expect, or actors, actresses, whatever, expect things from, their artistry or the industry, the paycheck per films, and the per diem, and the all the stuff. But it's like, what are you giving to your art, and also to your audience? Just remember, like, this is what we do. We have a great responsibility, as artists. We shape culture, as actors. And it's that people don't really, I think a lot of people may not see it that way. It's just like, oh, that you're famous because you did like a bunch of movies or this or that or whatever. But these things, like you guys said, you grew up, watching me. So that in some way, shape, or form probably had an impact, unbeknownst to me. So that's the power of like what we do. And I remember her saying, like, just remember that, and handle that with care.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
actually brings me to an interesting follow-up question, because when I think back about that film and the time that it came out, and you mentioned Macaulay Culkin, I mean, you were like one of the few of a black young child actors that was headlining a major studio film. Do you ever look back at that with the significance, especially for us? Like, I mean, I enjoy Home Alone, I enjoy all these films, but like, to see somebody like you, yeah, I mean, does that have an impact on you as an adult?
Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely will co-sign and say, Home Alone, to this day, like, that's, my wife and I, we have like a library of like holiday films from Thanksgiving, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Train plays, from Thanksgiving all the way through New Year's. Like, we have a set list of films that we may only watch once, around that time of year, but it's those films, and Home Alone is a part of, I think is going to be, that's a holiday, classic. But I think the significance of what I did, and this is not a, it's not a popular subject, but when you talk about racism, pre, you know, not just prejudice, but like racism, like systemic, racism, and how, you're able to see certain people thrive and do things, whereas you see others struggle and maybe not do as well. I think that definitely is at play here, because growing up, I would hear um and my mom and dad did the best that they could to kind of shield me from that, but I would hear the comparison. Well, hey, he's not Macaulay Culkin. They're negotiating, trying to get
Mm,
get me a
yeah.
fair shake at what I'm doing. And then, that would be like, well, that like that is reserved for Macaulay Culkin or Elijah Wood or whoever else that didn't maybe look like me. So
Mhm.
with me doing that film, and with the studio kind of like, okay, we're gonna release it. And I wouldn't say that they wrote it off, but it was more or less like, it wasn't the iteration that it came in. It wasn't what they envisioned, because it was supposed to be basically a white cast, a little white boy, and it wasn't even Burt Reynolds. It was some other person. Actually, it was three other people that they had mentioned, for some reason, and they're A-list, but the names elude me right now.
I heard a rumor Peter Weller, but I don't know if that's true.
That's random.
Yeah, I think that's kind of random. I never heard that. I feel like Mel Gibson was asked, but he's like,
Mm.
Yeah, right. And some other people, but yeah, so that it was supposed to not be what it was. And so when it was what it was, they were like, all right, well, hopefully we'll make our budget back, but whatever. And so then it became this thing where it was the number one film for 2 weeks, and not even to toot my own horn. I feel like, there's a great, I carry a great sense of humility, but I know that I had a lot to do with that. It's just in the sense
Yeah.
of when you look at the billboard, you look at the cover art, and it's like you got Burt Reynolds with the black kid sitting on his shoulder. And at the time, people knowing who what Burt Reynolds was, because he was like the Tom Cruise of the era. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Something like that. And so it's like, what the heck is going on here? You got Reynolds with a black kid on the top of the hat. So I think that was that was intriguing enough, but it was getting back to your question, like it was, I feel, monumental in and of itself. But unfortunately, because of other politics, it didn't really get the shine that it probably deserved. And I mean, it's one of those like cult classic things maybe now. And that also speaks to, I guess, the longevity or the lack thereof of my career or other former child actors who look like me as well. I mean, definitely you have like Malcolm Jamal Warner, the Cosby Kids, like I mentioned. There are other former child actors that went ahead and to do great things, like Kim Fields. She was at, I forget,
Facts of Life.
Life, and she's doing her thing. So it you do have former child actors that were black that did their thing, but again, from my experience and observation, like our walk was a lot different than those who didn't look like us, and it still is, unfortunately. And that's a hard pill to swallow, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it, but it's not just in the entertainment industry. I mean, it's
All
you
around.
Yeah.
it's a thing. And I think the more that it's like if we acknowledge it and not harp on it per se, but just like, yes, this is a thing, then we can start to actually see some changes.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Because, well, obviously for research, I recently rewatched the film, and I have to say it's surprising to me that I still find it, entertaining. It's not one of those like, oh, what was I thinking when I was a kid? I'm watching it now, and I'm like, wow, this still like holds up. And I have to say you have a natural charm on screen throughout that film, and I remember you're welcome. And I remember something that was surprising to me, but I guess it's true. I remember Roger Ebert's review for the movie where he said that if they could give a child actor an Oscar, give it to Norman Goldin the second. And that always stuck with me because it was like the only time, at least as far as I remember, him really, making note of, not only a child actor, but, an African American child
Yeah.
actor, and giving such praise. And I just remember that was, I think, I mean, I couldn't decide what movies I was going to go see. My parents ultimately made the decision. But I remember wanting to see the movie more after hearing him say that. Because again, like white critics, at the time, if it wasn't like, oh, kind of like an uplifting race movie, you never saw black actors really get congratulated unless they were already stars. And here
Mhm.
was somebody, and I might be wrong, but I think one of the, like, out of the popular critics, one of the few popular critics who was actually sitting here, like, you know what? I like the movie, and this black child actor, he's got the goods. So
Yeah.
that also really made a difference with me. And I don't know, did you like, I guess over the years find that out, or is this your first time
Over,
hearing?
over the years, I've since gone back and looked at all that stuff and some of the other things that was said about me, which is like, ooh, how could you be so cruel to a child?
They don't matter.
Exactly. Who are they? We
Right,
don't even
right.
know their names.
But yeah, I do, that was, um, yeah, I've looked at that, and it's interesting because I feel like that film was the reception was very polarizing. Some people, it's like they loved it, or it was like, oh, this is the worst thing. What is Bert doing? Who's this black kid? He's like an Eddie Murphy wannabe. And it's like, and some of that stuff, if I'm honest, was coming from this sense of what at the time they thought, buddy cop films
Yeah.
should look like. And because Cop and a Half didn't look like that, it was like, what the no, okay, I'm gonna reject it. This is terrible because this is not like stat quo.
Mhm.
Where so interesting when you say like the film still holds up. I've heard that so many times, and also too, I've also heard, in conjunction with that is that it's cult, it could be considered a cult classic because even though it didn't, it wasn't like, like you mentioned Home Alone, it's like, okay, no matter who you are, that film, it's popular, blah, blah, blah. Where Cop and a Half is like, it has a core following that's like, I don't care if this guy's 70, I'm still gonna be a fan of his because I remember, the childhood memories that this film evokes, so yeah, man, it definitely, yeah, those critics, yeah, I've gone back, I've like I said, I've seen and read and all that, and he was very, very kind, to the film, to and more so to me, and I think there was a sense of knowing, like, I know that other critics will probably destroy this film just because of the
Mhm.
element
Yeah.
that I mentioned before. 'Cause I don't want to keep harping on that.
Mhm.
So I really want to look at this objectively and pick out what I see that's real and that's natural. And I think he probably gave the best or the most fair. I mean, there were other critics that were fair as well, but I think that, at the time that, Siskel and Ebert were, they were the biggest. And yeah, he took the time to at least give it a fair shake. That other guy, because it got, yeah, it got a thumb up and a thumb down, and the guy
Mhm.
with the thumb down, his I remember reading his take on the film, and I'm like, this doesn't feel like it's actually a take on the film as much as it is a commentary on, like I mentioned, the politics of it.
Right.
Mhm.
And it's just like, what do you do with that? Because he'll say, well, no, this is what I thought about the film. It's like, nah, I don't know. It's a little personal. Something else.
So I want to switch gears to something else that you did after Cop and a Half that I thought was pretty significant at the time, and that's There Are No Children Here with
Yes.
Oprah. And I remember that was a big deal when it came out because my mom watched Oprah all the time. They were hyping it, and I didn't even realize until rewatching recently that you were in it, and your character having a stutter, surviving in the Chicago projects. Do you remember if that shoot was challenging? Do you like having to shoot in that environment and working with somebody with the stature of Oprah as well as Keith David?
Um, well, yeah, it we because we actually shot on location. If it was shot in projects
Mhm.
in the early 90s in Chicago. So I think one of the biggest challenges was like, oh, okay. Projects. And I mean, the shoot itself was actually pretty cool. I mean, even with being in the projects, the elements aside, I mean, the people, the reception that, I mean, they loved Oprah, and they loved the fact that, no matter what it looked like, the projects was getting some shine. So the reception that we had was like, hey, like this is cool, and of course there were elements or whatever, and there were talks about like how, Oprah and her security team, they actually had to go and talk to some of the people that was running the streets, and they
Mhm.
like, oh well, it's you, Oprah. So like we gonna hold you, we gonna make sure we hold you down. We ain't gonna be knuckleheads while y'all filming because we have that respect for you. But yeah, that was a very, very interesting shoot. It was obviously quite different than Cop and a Half in terms of just it was a drama, the story, the concept of it and what it was about. Yeah, it was a completely different experience, but it allowed me to access the range. Remember, I was talking about earlier in the conversation about, actors and, really getting into, parts. And so I go from, Cop and a Half being this like, whimsical, funny comedy buddy cop thing to like a kid that's living in super duper poverty and like bullets whizzing past his head at night while he's sleeping. So that was quite a different pace, but one that an experience that I really, really cherish because again, it got me to really understand like what this world of acting was about. It's not just, oh, you get to do the buddy cop films and you get to do the same type of stuff all the time. There's variation, you switch it up. So that was fun to do and to experience.
Mm. Right. Well, I remember when that came on ABC, and one of the big things was like, "Oh, Michael Jordan has a cameo in this film." And I know we've talked to former child actors who were like Luke Edwards, who worked on The Wizard, and he was like, they didn't even give us Super Mario 3 or a Power Glove. So I feel like I gotta ask, did you get some Jordans at least working on that film?
Man, I didn't even see Jordan when
Oh,
Oh man. That was gonna be my next question since I
yeah,
know you
because
had no scenes together.
when he did cameo, I believe the way that it was shot, because he didn't, from what I understand, he didn't actually like he agreed to appear in the film, but it wasn't like I'm gonna take some time out to film a scene for this
Mhm.
movie. I gotta catch when I'm going into practice, and that's essentially
Oh
what
man.
happened. If you notice, that's what he was getting out of his car. If I can recall, he was getting out of his car and he's like waving to people, and he was walking into the stadium. So they literally caught him. I think they may have done that a couple times. Like, okay, Jordan, can you just like reset and do that? Oh, all right, we got it. Now we film. So that was one of those things that I wasn't on. I probably wasn't even on set that day, or I was.
Oh man.
That may have been a second unit. I was on another setup, but I didn't get a chance to even meet him.
Oh man. Mm.
And nor did I get any Jordans. And I'm like, at the very least.
Yeah, they were
yeah, that
like, you
should have
have
been
to
for me.
buy. Oh, sorry, Andre.
No,
No,
no.
they're like, you have to go buy your own with that check we gave you.
And because I will reveal something that's probably mostly little known. Like so Nike actually was a sponsor. There was some sort of sponsorship that Universal had with Nike because some of my wardrobe, like the shoes that I had were Nikes. And so I ended up actually getting a lot of gear from Nike, like tracksuits and stuff, after the filming of Cop and a Half, which included a pair of Jordans, the sevens.
Oh.
That's my favorite. Yeah, and I actually got a couple there, and so I guess that's like, I mean, he probably didn't even know about that, but if he did, it's like, all right, kid, well, you got your got your pairs, you're good.
Your karmic justice.
Yeah,
I'd like to believe Burt had a hand in that.
probably, probably. I wouldn't be surprised because I mean that talking about generosity, like he was very, very generous. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's like, you know what, hook him up. And it wasn't just me because actually my family, like my parents and my two sisters, we all got Jordans and tracksuits
Oh,
and t-shirts
nice.
stuff. Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah, so I mean, your career pretty much after Cop and a Half, there wasn't much beyond that point. Obviously, we mentioned the HBO movie you were in, and we didn't talk about Moby Dick or the other movie you did with Joan Plowright, but was
Or
there a
gone fishing.
yeah, your small part of Gone Fishing, but was
Yeah.
there a reason you ultimately decided to just step away after a couple of years?
Yeah, there were a few reasons, there are a few circumstances. I think one of the bigger ones was, like I mentioned, I'm, the youngest of 3 children in my family, and so at some point, my eldest sibling, she was, starting her family and, getting married and doing all the family stuff. So it was, I think at the time that I kind of made my departure, it was great for, my development as a young man, growing into a young man and, like really understanding what life is really about and not like getting caught up in chasing the next gig or even getting to a point where I'm like, okay, he's found his niche. He's typecast into this. So now we're gonna work him like a donkey. You know what I'm saying? I was able to actually really like take some time back and see like, okay, is this really what I want to do with my life? Or what do I want to do with my life? Because I know 10 years ago when I was like, I want to be an actor, it's like, okay, do you still want to be an actor? And so then that's that one side of it. And then the other side of it was, yes, I still do want to act. And now, oh, I can write and I have, desire to direct and produce. And now I am actually really seeing a lot of the politics and what the industry is about. And so I think it was a twofold thing of me stepping away just naturally, to grow and grow into my own and become my own self, not defined by my fame and all that stuff. But then also, when wanting to return or, come back and, do some things, it, met with the reality of like, okay, number one, and this is whether you're black or white, you know, whoever, you're only as good as your last project. And if your last project is 10 years ago, you're essentially starting over. And it's, the frustrating yet interesting part about that is if you go in any industry, if you look at my resume and you go to any other industry, you'd be kind of welcomed with open arms, like, okay, this guy's a veteran. He knows his way around, a stage, a camera, whatever. But now it's like, well, get in line. I mean, you've got, and this leads me to my next point of like how the industry has even evolved with, we're looking for, they're now looking at IG profiles. Like if you got 60,000 followers
Yeah.
versus, somebody with 5,000, that 60,000 follower person is going to be brought into the room because they have an audience that can be easily tapped into. They can be talentless as all get out. Excuse me
Mhm.
for saying that. But that's, it becomes more of like a political business kind of a deal. So getting back to your question, yeah, it's like I walked away, consciously like needing to develop, naturally into the whole person that I am today. And then also just, navigating the very challenging landscape of Hollywood. And I mean, you guys have seen you probably heard about and seen the headlines, the Me Too movement and
Mhm.
the different things that have happened, over the course of, time. I mean, Diddy and stuff like that, so it's like, I'm the type of person where it's like, I'm not into doing things that are outside of my character or moral compass just to be famous,
Mhm.
or am I into like, okay, well, I got to play the game. There was this whole thing around, comedians or just, male black actors at some point having to wear dress or dress up like a
Oh
woman,
yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not, that's just not, I feel like if I have to do that, then that's certainly not for me. I mean, to each their own. If, Kevin Hart and any of those guys that want to do that, like if that's what they feel they have to do to, do your thing. But I know for me, like, I don't think that that's necessary. And so sometimes that might, limit your ability to navigate. And people be like, oh, well, he's washed up. He fell off. Not necessarily. It could be, all right, well, you're not playing the game. So we're going to close that door and see ya. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us about Enormous?
Oh, enormous. My illustrious, are you talking about my illustrious rap career?
Yes.
I got
Yeah.
yeah. Um, you know, I come from a very musical family. And like if you know my family, you'd probably be like, wow, I'm surprised that he wasn't like a little Michael Jackson or something. Like, he sings, he raps. And so I think that was not I think, I know that that was something that I had to get out, something that I
Okay.
had to I had been interested in music, I mean an overall artist. Like I've been interested in music, even when I was starting to act. In fact, I wrote a song for Cop and a Half called It's the Half and recorded it and everything. And I because my parents knew, a couple producers and they knew some people kind of like in the music scene doing some music things. And so one night after, we wrapped and the film hadn't came out yet, I think they were still cutting it. And so we had this idea of, well, why don't we write a rap song and Norman can, you know, perform it. And so I did record and everything, and we submitted it to Henry Winkler, and he's just like, ah, it's good. But you guys have seen Cop and a Half, and it was supposed to be on the end. So
Mhm.
he decided that Nothing But Love Can't Fix was a better.
Joey Lawrence. Oh my
But
God.
it wasn't that, yeah, right. It wasn't that, and it's again, Joey Lawrence was an actor trying to get a music career started. And so I wasn't necessarily trying to get a music career started, but I felt like that would have been a much cuter, more
Exactly.
poignant, like cap to the film by having Devin Butler talk about, it's the half. So come out with your hands, you know. But it was more about Joey Lawrence being Henry Winkler's eldest son's best friend, who they have
Uh,
gone. You see what I'm saying?
mhm,
I
That's
see.
what I've been kind of talking about.
Mhm.
mhm.
So that relationship, because you look at it, okay, Nothing But Love Can Fix. What are we talking about here? This is a buddy cop film.
Exactly. It's like this feels a little inappropriate.
Just a little bit. Just a little. If your mind went there, you'd be like, what the okay. So
Whatever. Okay.
you guys know that's a little unknown fact. So yes, I recorded well before Enormous as an
Okay.
8-year-old. I record. I still try to remember because I remember bits and pieces of that song. It's been so long, but it started off like from a half to a whole. Been a cop is in my soul. Got my first badge at only 9 years old. Now I'm arresting, protesting for the sake of justice. A temporary hero. Superman can't even touch this. Half of the team squad uniforms, whatever. Incarcerating the felons who think they're kind of clever. Serving the sentence that they wrote for themselves, while the half puts another soft case on the shelves, like Agatha Christie. I'll solve the mystery and everything else. Consider it history. That was the first verse of
Nice.
the
See,
song. The
I'm
hook
like, if go ahead.
half.
No, sorry. No, I was gonna say if Raven Simone can have her little single as a child, you're telling me that couldn't have gone out there.
Right.
I'm saying, so yeah, I mean, and it, on another note, everything happens for a reason.
True.
So it's interesting when I get asked about Enormous, a lot of people think that just came out of left field, but it's like,
Mhm.
nah, I've been rapping since I was 8, like literally.
Be like, by any chance, is there anywhere where we could get this single from the half?
Well, if you have access to a storage unit that I may or may not have somewhere around that contains the ADAT, that get those files, and if you can even find an ADAT player,
Exactly.
you might have a chance.
So what you're saying is there's a chance.
Hey, sure.
Well, I just want to introduce maybe a little trivia about Cop and a Half you didn't know. Did you know that one of your co-stars, who really only has one line but appears in a few scenes, is comedian, actress, activist Amanda Seales.
Oh yeah, I know.
Oh, damn. I thought I was going to catch you with that one. Rewatching, I was like, that's Amanda Seales. Oh, my God.
I know all about it.
I would expect so.
Is
Just kidding. Maybe not everything, but I do know quite a bit. And yes, we were really good friends at some point. Um, but yeah, I know Amanda.
okay. So I thought I got you.
Now, I know time is running a little bit short, but I just have one more question for you. It's actually music related. So on the IMDb, I saw that in addition to the hip hop, you've also done some work in jazz. And among the artists you worked with was Nestor Torres. And then one of my favorites, Herbie Hancock. So I got to ask about that experience, especially with Herbie working with him.
Yeah. So a little known fact about me. So I'm a Nichiren Buddhist. So I
Hmm.
practice Nichiren Buddhism. And so, we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which means devotion to the mystic law of cause and effect through sound, which is basically a way to fuse your life with the universal forces, which is all encompassing. So it's another way of saying, like, I am one with God. God is me and I am God, and so forth and so on.
Right.
Kind of controversial if you're coming from the Bible Belt, but that's a whole nother topic, a whole nother interview. So I say all that to say, Nestor Torres is also a Nichiren Buddhist, and so is Herbie Hancock. So we practice in the same organization, which is Soka Gakkai International of America, USA. And at the time, we're no longer actually doing this, but a little known fact, or you guys may or may not know who this guy is. His name is Benny Maupin. I have an immense amount of respect for this guy. He's a composer. I mean, he's composed for Coltrane, Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock. I mean, this guy is, you talk about legend. It's so unfortunate that he probably isn't as well known as he should be, but not only is he legendary, but he's very talented. He's got a, like, talking about an artist, like, this man is the bomb. So he created this, uh I guess you can say, like, a group of, artists that are, Nichiren Buddhists. And so he got us all to, well, got them all together, because I wasn't a part of it's a big band basically. And so they would do these annual year-end concerts, like holiday concerts. And it was called the International ICAP. I don't know. I'm blanking on the name of the band, but basically it was like a group for peace, for world peace. Getting together, playing for the sake of world peace as Nichiren Buddhists. So yeah, so Benny Maupin had them all together. I later joined. I actually did a it was a concert. It was like a benefit concert where I had some of my music from. It was a single that I had released from my EP, and it was to raise funds for, to bring more awareness to, like, gang violence and stuff. And so he happened to be there, and he heard the song that I had written, and it's on my EP. Actually, it's called Creation, and he's like, and it has that jazzy kind of a theme, and he's like, "Yo, I like that. Do you think I can compose some music to that and you can join us at our next ICAP performance?" And I'm standing there going, knowing who he is. Now, this is tying back to that earlier question you guys asked me about if I was ever starstruck. I think that probably was one of the times that I was like,
Hmm.
okay, so this guy who has worked with, like, all these heavy hitters is asking to compose a song that I did. I'm like, hell yeah. No, let me talk to the manager. Let me get my lawyer involved. Like, no, like, yes, you can do this. So anyway, long story short, yes, he basically brought us all together. And so the show that I ended up collaborating with, and Herbie Hancock was there, he played keys for most of the songs that were presented in that was on the bill for that concert. It was back in maybe 2009, I want to say. So yeah, and then Nestor Torres, we had actually collaborate. Our collaboration was a little bit more close knit, if you will, for the lack of a better term. We worked a lot closer together than myself and Herbie, because we collaborated on a song that he had done for his new album at the time, which was, I think, I want to say 2010 or 2011. That album came out, and on that album, something's worth of note. He actually recites the Lotus Sutra, the prayer that we recite as Buddhists. He actually composed that into a song and played the flute along with it, which was amazing. With the chanting in the background, it was amazing. You guys should check that out if you ever get a chance. But it was
Definitely.
a song for that album that we had collaborated on. The song didn't actually make the album, but we had performed a couple of events here in California, here in LA, in particular, for that album or for that song. So yeah, I've worked with them. Working with Nestor Torres was amazing. I mean, this guy is, again, talented, much like, Mr. Moppin. Um, but pleasure to work with those gentlemen.
Mm. Yeah. Well, we definitely want to thank you for being on the show today. And I guess my last question for you would be, I know you've been producing movies recently and writing some stuff. What have you been working on, like as the most recent, or any future projects you have coming out?
Okay. So I have a couple of projects that I have been working on for a while, that I'm now just basically, looking to see where they, get them out there and see where they land. So I have a project that I have been working on called Misperception. I actually did a short film version of this, back in it's released back in 2017. It's on Amazon. You can find it on Amazon Prime, actually.
Okay.
And it's basically tackling the relationship between law enforcement and the Black community.
Hmm.
This project was near and dear to me for a couple reasons. One, I mean, I know you guys remember, the pandemic, and even before the pandemic. I mean, Black men have been getting shot down by cops since the beginning of time, almost. Damn near. And it's a conversation that I think needs to be had, because I'm, as a Buddhist, my our one of my biggest things is like really being able to look at the true, perceive the true nature of things, because everybody has a perception, based on their experience of something. And I think that with Black people, we have our own issues in our community, but a large part of why racism has been so pervasive, and discrimination, all that, is because there is a perception of us through the lens of other people. And that perception, I mean, whether it's real or manufactured, it exists. And so, but there's always two sides to a thing. So even with the title Misperception, it's like there's also a lot of Black police officers that are putting their lives on the line to serve and protect their own communities. And so with that said, and I have a cousin, actually my first cousin, who well, both of my first cousins, so it's two brothers, one's older, one's younger. And so the younger of the two, he's a detective for the Milwaukee PD, and then the older is a filmmaker. That's who I actually collaborated with to make this film. And so, this came about because we were hearing stories of how he's like, as a Black police officer working the beat in Milwaukee, I could see a lot of bulls in our community. And I'm like, yo, like, he's telling he's telling stories without getting to, because I know we're low on time, but like he'd walk into situations where he's got his uniform on and he's seeing these guys over here like doing some BS, and he's like, "Yo, like, I'm a cop, right? Like, I have a badge and a gun, and I can arrest you because you're doing something illegal." But it was one of those things where it was like, forget you, N word, like, what you gonna do? Oh, you gonna arrest me? Oh, and then what they would do is turn it into this Black on Black. Oh, you just messing with me because you a cop, and F all y'all, blah, blah, blah. So he's not, and he's like, they're not understanding. I became a cop so that I can actually help to protect you from Billy over here, who would see you and use that as an excuse to just kill you because he has a license to do that. So I'm like essentially trying to save your life, but you're testing me, So it's this misperception about what law enforcement actually really represents, specifically in our community. And specifically when you have brothers and sisters that have put their lives on the line to serve and protect specifically our people, because we know how it is for us. So that show, that film, raises a lot of questions, and I've had people be like, "Well, man, you, Norman, you with this cop stuff. First, you was infatuated being a cop and a half. Now you're doing this," and it's like, but it's a conversation that definitely needs to be had, and we need to keep it in the forefront. So that's one project that's near and dear to me. It's I've got the short, and now we're actually developing it for 1 hour drama, right?
Oh, okay.
Talking to some people, some Canadian film companies, and even some people here, and also some Canadian film companies, to see where it lands. And then another project that's also very near and dear to me is my story. As everything that I've told you all, I want to be able to share that. And I've been told that I should do like a series, or like do a film or a series where it's like, you've got multiple seasons, but I really want to be able to do a limited series where I can share from top to bottom, if you want to. Obviously, I'm not dead yet. I still have a life to live. Right. But, I want to, when people ask the questions like, well, what happened? Why didn't you, go bigger than what you could have done? And it's like, well, I want to visually be able to show, like, here's why. So are you guys familiar with the show Entourage?
Yes.
Yes.
So, Entourage had this, like, it was basically a show that was centered in wish fulfillment. You see these guys and they're like, oh, they're having the time of their life, these mansion parties and, pool parties and women and whatever, right? Private jets. And that represents about 3% of Hollywood and actors, even in A-listers, because all A-listers don't live like that. So my thing is, I want to show the other, was it 97% of what it's really like, or I should say maybe the 10 or 15% of people like myself that's just struggling to do what they love, and they have to navigate all this politics or whatever, all these politics. So that project is called The Kid. I actually did a short film about that's on Amazon Prime as well. It's called Hollywood Kid, but the show would be called The Kid. So I'm in the process of actually, I'm doing a couple of rewrites, and then I'm going to start to pitch that as well.
Okay.
And then, one other,
no problem.
I have been working in tech for the last 11 years or so. And I'm in the process of launching my own startup, which basically helps performers, former child actors, creators, influencers, navigate fame, and the spotlight, and, like, what it means to, from a business standpoint, to, the visibility of, like, fans, connecting with fans, and then, the all the PR people and the managers, like, needing you to be on 100%, wondering, some people are wondering, like, how do I sustain a life like that? Well, here are some tools that hopefully I can help you. Having been through, that myself, here's how you can navigate that.
So. Yeah, well, Norman, I mean, this was an honor and a privilege to speak
Yes,
with you.
definitely.
And I know it's mostly been about Cop and a Half, but dude, you've done such meaningful work that's so positive in your imagery and what you've been doing to represent the culture and keeping your feet on the ground. That's just inspiration in itself. And we definitely want to promote the new things that come along whenever you'd like to come back anytime. We're happy to do so.
Yeah, no doubt. This has been fun. I've been had a lot of fun talking to you guys. Good time. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you.
If you like this review, please be sure to like and hit subscribe to be alerted to new episodes in the future.